Good morning and welcome to the Core Connection. I'm Mira Rubin here with you on Enlightened World Network. And today's topic is contracts. And we're kind of talking about them probably in a more metaphorical way, but a lot of us feel like we have these contracts and that they're binding us to certain behaviors and patterns in our lives. And the thing is, what if what if there's some fine print that we didn't get to read or that we didn't even notice, we didn't pay attention to, and maybe that fine print includes some kind of escape clause or conditions that when met, the remainder of the contract is rendered null and void. So it should be a fun conversation, speaking in possible metaphors, possible truths today. Good morning, Rosalind. Welcome. It's so good to have you here with us this morning, and welcome to everybody else who's joining us. Before we get started in this morning's conversation, let's take a couple minutes to get present. So let's take a deep breath in through your nose and hold it. And imagine clean, crisp oxygen flooding your lungs, flowing into your bloodstream, nourishing all your cells, all your organs, bringing vital life energy to your body and being. And as you exhale, exhale any tension, stress, negativity, fatigue. And now let's take another deep breath in through your nose and hold it. This time, imagine brilliant, bright light, lighting you up from the inside out, illuminating, electrifying, and energizing all your cells, all your molecules, your electrons, creating a brilliant beam of light and energy from your heart out into the world. And as you exhale, exhale any remaining tension, stress, negativity, fatigue. And now let's press our palms together. Vigorously rub your hands together to feel the friction, the temperature, the pressure, the motion, the tickling and tingling when you stop, and allow all those sensations to bring you present right here, right now, into this remarkable physical form that enables us to experience life. Welcome, welcome, welcome. So, contracts, this conversation, it's interesting because I've been very challenged lately by a contract that I signed with a company to support me in the development of my business. And there were a couple gotcha clauses in there that weren't apparent until there was an issue. And so it's funny because I read this contract very, very carefully and didn't recognize the red flags in there until a circumstance arose that activated those red flags. So today we're talking about it in a little bit of a different perspective, where we often experience that we have this life contract where it seems like we're destined in some way to be repeating certain patterns over and over. And this conversation came up with a client where we were talking about money and their ability to break free of this, what seemed to be this money contract that was keeping them on the edge, on the verge of being able to make a huge difference in the world and make huge amounts of money with which they could make even more of a difference in the world. But every time they approached this possibility, it was like um, something undermined them, and the contract that they were perceiving was that they would never achieve certain levels of financial abundance because their contract was to remain humble, and that they wouldn't allow, or the contract was to disallow the possibility that they might abuse power and become arrogant and righteous and disconnected, etc. So the contract was that they would always just be on the edge of this possibility of success. And they said, it feels like a contract. I said, yeah, but you didn't read the fine print. And the fine print says that when you know who you are, when you know and trust that you can remain kind, that you can remain conscious, that you can remain present, when you trust yourself enough to know that that's who you are, then the floodgates will open and this contract will be null and void. And it was such an amazing conversation, because this person is a person that has dedicated themselves to service at their own expense in many, many cases, but has dedicated themselves to service. They've created more positive change in the world than pretty much anybody I know, on a greater scale. And yet they, in terms of self-care, non-existent. Like there was always a guilt or a compulsion to go, have to do this or have to do that, do something else, do more. Is never enough. And as a result of this session and seeing this fine print that on the contract that they had never noticed before, they experienced their freedom from this contract for the first time in their lives. And as they got this freedom from the contract, what was remarkable was that the capacity to take care of themselves, to just have a bath, like to be able to just relax and luxuriate in a bath, literally, was available to them as a first. And this, it may not sound like a huge breakthrough to be able to just take a luxurious bath, but this was monumental for this person. And the freedom from this contract that through which they felt oppressed, really, and frustrated and limited. The dissolution of this contract created such freedom. And so the conversation today is about what kind of contracts do we have that we haven't noticed the fine print, where we haven't noticed the fine print, where there's a clause in there that says, but when you come into your own, when you sort of complete this growth or transformation, then this contract is null and void. You can tear it up, and those constraints are no longer at play. How exciting is that? And I would venture to say that the likelihood is that for those of us who experience these contracts, or metaphorically real, whatever, if we're imagining them that vividly, then they are real in some level and dimension. But if we could allow ourselves to see the fine print, which, and the thing is that we only see the fine print when we're ready, when we're at that place where the fine print is actually in play. And we become freed of it. And then what? Then what it's like is that we've crossed a threshold into a new awareness, a new state of being, a new life, a new chapter, that we've completed our agreement. We've fulfilled the terms of the contract. And then we get to move on. And, it's interesting. It's bringing to mind another client that I worked with. And this was such a cool thing. Rosalind says, holding on to items you don't need anymore. This reminds me to declutter. Yeah, that's a really interesting association there, Rosalind, for sure. To recognize there are things that we don't need anymore. In our patterns, in our behaviors, in our environment, in our possession, there are many things that we outgrow. We outgrow the need for. And I like the notion of decluttering emotionally, psychically, as well as physically. I'm trying to find my track again. Oh, okay. So there was another client who had, I don't know if it was a psychic they had gone to, or some kind of sage type person who said, you've completed your contract. Your work that you came here to do is done. And this became a crisis for this person, because the way that they interpreted that was that their life was meaningless now. Instead of, they were given their life to do whatever would bring them joy. Like, they completed their obligations, they fulfilled their required commitments, and now they were free to do and explore and create. Instead, they had interpreted it as they lost their reason for being. And they've turned that around since, because they have found, the callings of their soul, their inner heart and soul, after completing whatever this work was. And now they're doing their work. That is their joy, that is the expression of their heart and soul, which is a beautiful, magnificent thing, making a huge, profound impact in the world. But we can identify with these contracts as who we are, as our reason for being, or we can recognize them as constraints, or reflective of a particular phase of our lives or of our growth. I think it can be useful to look at what these themes are in our lives. we can think of them as contracts, we can think of them as themes, we can think of them as karma. But we can think of them as learning opportunities, which is what I think karma is anyway. I'm not inclined to believe that karma is retribution. It's opportunity, just like everything else. But anyway, it's a beneficial thing in learning to know ourselves. It's a beneficial thing to look at the themes of our lives, because I've seen thematic patterns in my life as well. And I think it's a good thing to, as we start identifying and recognizing those themes, to, if we think about them as contracts, to start looking for the fine print. What is it? What is the key? We could also think of it as a treasure chest. Here's this locked treasure chest. That's the contract. And when the contract is completed, when the fine print condition is fulfilled, that treasure chest just pops open. And the thing that's keeping us from the expression of our own treasures, our own deepest expression, then becomes available to us. So what is the fine print? What is it? What are these patterns that we believe we've been locked into, that we've perhaps perpetuated? And how can we rewrite the contract, or just notice that there's this exit clause that then voids the balance of it, voids the balance of the contract. You've completed the terms of it. Or you just run the contract out, you've completed the terms, done, it's over, and we get to move on. So yes, so Rosalind says contracts usually have a period or an expiration date or a condition when a certain condition is met. So all of those things. And when we think that contracts have an expiration date or an expiration condition, then maybe we can look at these contracts that in our lives, these patterns of our lives that allow us to move beyond the constraints of it, to be complete with it, to let it be done, let it be finished, to move on, truly move on to our fuller next level expression. So I think it's such an interesting way to consider our lives. It often feels like there's something prescribing certain circumstances and events that occur and recur in our lives. And that's what I'm talking about with these contracts. And the thing is, first off, we might not recognize those repeats. Then once we do recognize them, it seems like we have these themes that we work on and we work on and we work on, and it seems like we keep working on the same thing. I've done so much work on that topic, whatever. So many of my clients have come to me with things that they've worked on forever. In fact, that's one of the things that we start working with first or one of my first questions is like, what have you been working on forever that's still that's still active, that's still resident for you. And then at some point we're done. At some point we're actually complete with that. And the contract is complete. So it's interesting in this conversation, in these kinds of contracts, my awareness about them is that the shift is a shift of being. So in this person's case, it was a shift of self-acceptance, like a movement into self-trust and self-love. And so recognizing that, it's no surprise that then this person was able to do some self-care and nurturing where they weren't previously able to. They used to speak horribly to themselves and just tell themselves how awful they were. And to see that melt away, to see the self-trust emerging and gaining traction and then gaining prominence is such a blessing and a gift to witness. And so what was happening, or what the transition was, the fine print was this shift of being. And so when we stop punishing ourselves, it's interesting because life then seems to let up on its punishment too. You know, that they're maybe somewhat inseparable, that we are in collusion in the experience of self-punishment or of punishment. That when we believe ourselves unworthy, when we believe ourselves to be bad or well, unworthy, then life has a way of presenting those circumstances over and over. And as those circumstances get presented more and more, we can continue, it can deepen our conviction of our own unworthiness, where the shift in the fine print is actually to rise above that condition, to rise into a different experience of ourselves. And what's ironic is that the circumstances can make it harder and harder and harder, and it looks like that's the contract. I'm just going to get beat up by life. That's the contract, until we somehow transcend it. And sometimes it takes getting beaten up to the point where you just can't get up, and when you give up the being beaten up, all of a sudden there's a transformation. So sometimes it needs to get to the point of being so bad that you have to do something different. Other times we are able to gradually peel away these attachments to negative self-perception. So circumstances for this person had kept affirming over and over that they were never going to get to where they knew they could be financially and impact wise in the world because of this arrogance that they were afraid of. And then they just had a revelation. It's like, it's not about being punished. It's about finding that connection to self and that trust and belief that then shifted the whole experience, that voided the contract. And I think that there are those kinds of clauses in whatever these life contracts are. They're not there as punishment. They're there as a passage. They're there as a pathway to awakening. So Rosalind says consequences for not fulfilling terms could include nothing changes or someone gets hurt or we get more hurt, right? So there are consequences, or the contract gets extended. That could be a consequence too, right? They're all different. The thing is that if it's in the fine print and you didn't even see the fine print, let alone read the fine print, how do you know what the exit clause is to the contract, right? So it was interesting that this person was like, I didn't even know there was fine print. I never saw it there before. And that in itself was a revelation. So it's maybe like when you're ready, it appears. It's like when the student's ready, the teacher appears. When you're ready, the fine print appears, the exit clause. Anyway, just sort of a fun way to think about our life paths sometimes. So that's it for this morning. I'm Mira Rubin. This is the Core Connection. And I go live here each weekday morning at 9 a.m. Eastern on the Enlightened World Network Facebook page and YouTube channel, and my Facebook page, Mira Rubin. And I just want to encourage you to check out the other awesome programming on Enlightened World Network and Enlightened World Living. And as always, I just feel so grateful to have the opportunity to have this time together to explore and muse and discover. So until next time.